Ever notice how some cultures really emphasize community, while others are all about the individual?
Yeah, it's a fascinating difference.
That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Sounds intriguing.
We found this YouTube video by Evangelos Theokrikis.
Who's that?
He's a Greek philosopher and theologian,
Okay.
and he's comparing Greek and Western thought on this whole individual versus community thing.
I'm already curious.
It's like he's saying there's not just one right way to see the world.
Makes sense.
Right. So Tsikiriki starts by highlighting this idea of society of persons.
Society of persons.
Yeah, apparently it's super important in Greek thought.
Interesting.
He's drawing on the work of Christos Giannaris, another Greek thinker.
Okay.
Giannaris basically says that individual identity grows through relationships and shared responsibility, not isolation.
So you become your best self by being part of something bigger.
Exactly. It's less about, I'm going to go it alone, and more about, we're all in this together.
That's a big difference from the pull yourself up by your bootstraps idea you often hear.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
So how does this society of persons idea actually play out?
Well, take Greek Orthodox theology, for example.
Okay.
Individual salvation isn't something you achieve on your own.
It's not.
Nope. It's achieved within the communion of saints,
Yeah.
the church as a community.
Oh, so your spiritual growth is tied to your relationship.
Exactly. It's like a group pilgrimage. Everyone supports each other.
That's a beautiful image.
It is, isn't it? And this focus on community pops up again and again.
So it's really central to Greek thought.
Very central.
Got it.
Tsikirikis brings up another interesting guy, Panagiotis Karavitis,
Then who was he?
a sociologist and economist who also focused on this communal approach.
I see. What was his take?
Well, he argued that Greek tradition values collaboration, participation, and shared responsibility.
Okay.
It's a stark contrast to Western economic theories that are all about self-interest and competition.
So how did this play out in real life?
Imagine a small village in Greece.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
People share resources, work together, and support each other through everything.
That's the society of persons in action.
You got it. And Karavitas pointed out this was even stronger during tough times like the Ottoman rule.
Wow, so community really helped them get through those hard times.
Absolutely. There's a real resilience in that.
I can see that.
So we've got this strong emphasis on community in Greek thought.
Right.
Now let's flip to the Western perspective.
Okay. Time for a different viewpoint.
Right, and here's where St. Augustine comes in.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
He's huge GE in Western thought. Tsikirikis points to him as a major influence.
I see. So what makes Augustine's ideas different?
Well, for Augustine, it was all about individual redemption and personal accountability.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, each person is responsible for their own sins and their own salvation.
That's a very different focus.
It is, isn't it? Your personal relationship with God is key for eternal life.
So it's more about forging your own path to God.
Exactly. That direct connection is central.
Totally different from the Greek view.
Two very different approaches. So far, we've got the Greek tradition emphasizing community and shared responsibility,
Right.
and the Western Augustinian perspective, all about individual responsibility and a personal relationship with God.
And those differences affect how cultures approach so many things.
Yeah.
Ethics, politics, economics.
It's not just philosophy, it's real life.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got this contrast, but what about modern Greece? You mentioned schizophrenia.
Oh yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
I bet. Tell me more.
Modern Greeks are caught between these two worlds.
They are.
On one hand, they value individual freedom and self-reliance.
Okay.
But they also feel this strong sense of loyalty and obligation to their family and community.
So it's like they're juggling two sets of values.
Precisely. And it leads to some fascinating situations, as we'll see when we dig deeper into Tsikirikis' analysis.
I can't wait to hear more.
Me neither.
Okay, so modern Greeks are dealing with this push and pull between individual responsibility and a strong sense of community.
It's a real balancing act.
It sounds like it. Did Tsikirikis give any examples of how this schizophrenia plays out?
Oh, he did. Some really insightful ones.
Like what?
Well, he talked about how this tension can cause misunderstandings between Greeks and people from more individualistic cultures.
Yeah, different cultural expectations and all that.
Exactly. So let's say someone in Greece loses their job.
Okay.
In a more individualistic culture, people might focus on the person's choices.
Like they didn't work hard enough or need new skills.
Right, that whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality.
But in Greece.
In Greece, the community would likely rally around them, offering support.
Oh, that's interesting.
Family and friends would help out, maybe even financially.
It's more about shared responsibility than individual blame.
Exactly.
That makes me think of philatimo.
Philetimo.
Yeah, that Greek concept that's hard to translate.
I know it.
It's often translated as love of honor, but it seems to go deeper.
You're right, it does.
It's about duty and responsibility to your family, friends, and community.
And their well-being is tied to your own.
Exactly.
It's a great example of this community-oriented mindset.
It is. So imagine someone from an individualistic culture sees this.
Sees what?
A Greek family helping a relative who's struggling financially.
Okay.
They might think, they're enabling them, they should push for independence.
But from the Greek perspective, it's about love and support.
Right. It's upholding that sense of community.
Exactly. Not enabling dependence, but being there for each other.
So it's not just abstract philosophy.
Nope.
These values affect how people interact and view the world.
Absolutely. It's like they're speaking different languages.
Perfect analogy. And it shows how important it is to understand these differences.
Especially in our globalized world.
So true. Do you think these different perspectives also affect politics and social issues?
Definitely. Take the role of government, for example.
Okay.
Individualistic societies emphasize limited government.
Right, the idea that you're responsible for yourself.
Exactly. Government assistance is a last resort.
Whereas in more collectivist societies, like Greece, the government might play a bigger role.
Right. Providing social safety nets, healthcare, education.
It's a totally different approach.
And it's not that one is better.
It's not.
Both have pros and cons.
That makes sense.
Individualism can foster innovation, but also lead to inequality.
And collectivism can create strong communities, but maybe stifle individual initiative.
You got it. It seems like finding the right balance is a challenge everywhere.
Especially as the world becomes more interconnected.
Absolutely. It's a constant conversation and negotiation between values.
And it makes you wonder if these opposing perspectives can ever be fully reconciled.
It's a good question. Or maybe it's about embracing the tension, acknowledging that both individual responsibility and community matter.
Maybe it's a both hand situation, not an either.
You've hit on something really important there. And Sikrikis seems to suggest that this tension, this schizophrenia, might actually be a source of strength.
Really? That's a fascinating idea.
It is, isn't it? And we'll dive into it more after a quick break.
My mind is kind of blown right now.
I know, right?
We've been talking about this contrast between Greek and Western thought.
Right.
This whole individual responsibility versus community thing.
Yeah.
And now you're saying this schizophrenia could be a good thing.
Well, it sounds strange.
It does.
But think of it this way.
Okay.
When you're constantly challenged to see things from different sides,
Yeah.
to consider values that seem contradictory, it makes you think more critically.
It does.
You question your own assumptions.
So it's like a mental workout.
Exactly. Like mental gymnastics for your worldview.
I like that. So
Yeah.
instead of getting stuck in one way of thinking,
Yeah.
you become more adaptable, more open.
Exactly. So like if you only lift weights with one arm,
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
one arm gets strong, but the other stays weak.
You need to work out both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the individual responsibility muscle and the community muscle.
So maybe it's about embracing both,
I think so.
honoring both individual responsibility and community.
Yeah, even when they pull us in different directions.
You're right. It's not either. It's both hand.
Exactly. Recognizing the value of both perspectives.
And they're not mutually exclusive.
Not at all. You can be a strong individual and a valuable member of a community.
They can even reinforce each other.
Absolutely.
So what does this mean for us, for people listening who aren't Greek, trying to figure out their place in the world?
That's a great question.
How do we apply these ideas?
I think it starts with awareness
Awareness.
of our own biases,
Yeah.
Recognizing that our way isn't the only way
Makes sense.
and being open to learning from other cultures,
Even those that are different from ours.
especially those.
So it's about being more curious.
Yes.
More empathetic.
More.
More willing to listen, even when it's challenging.
You got it. And remembering that embracing both isn't a zero-sum game.
Right. It's not like one wins and the other loses.
When we cultivate both,
Yeah.
hold those values in tension, we create a richer, more fulfilling way of life.
It's funny.
Why do you...
We started with this question.
About individual autonomy versus community.
Yeah. And it seems like the answer is both.
I think you're right. It's about finding that sweet spot, that balance.
Where both the individual and the community can thrive.
Exactly. Not always easy, but definitely worth it.
Well, listeners, that's our deep
It's
dive.
been quite a journey.
We explored Greek and Western thought.
Right.
We wrestled with individual responsibility and community.
Big ideas.
And hopefully we've all come away with a deeper understanding.
I hope it.
There's one key takeaway.
What is it?
It's that we're not alone in the search for meaning.
We're all in this together.
Navigating these complex ideas.
And as we navigate, let's remember to embrace the boat hand.
Our individual uniqueness and our interconnectedness.
Yes.
Let's be curious, empathetic, and willing to learn.
From everyone.
Because in that openness and dialogue, where
Yeah.
we recognize both our shared humanity and our individual differences. Exactly.
That's where we create a world where everyone can flourish.
Beautifully said.
So listeners, as you go about your day,
Yeah.
we leave you with this.
Mm.
How can you cultivate both a strong sense of personal responsibility and a deeper connection to your community?
That's a great question for everyone to consider.
What small steps can you take to embrace that both hand?
And create a more fulfilling world for yourself and others.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those questions flowing.